Hi, I'm David Blanton. Today I'm going to talk to you about the 3 best times, in my opinion, to hunt a mature whitetail. So I've been blessed over the years, 34 years now to be exact, of working here at Realtree and hunting and filming for Realtree. And I've witnessed a lot of things, and obviously whitetail is our bread and butter, and 85%, 90% of our hunting is for whitetail deer. And what I've learned is there are, in my opinion, 3 really good times, 3 better times to hunt a mature whitetail buck. And some of them may surprise you, but the very first time that I think is a great opportunity to hunt a mature whitetail. And when I say mature, I mean a whitetail buck that's 4.5 years or older. The first would be early season. What makes early season whitetails a really great time to hunt them? Well, I guess maybe the most important question is, what is early season? What do you consider early season to be? Well, for me, it's when these deer are in velvet and have just come out of velvet, which is obviously, depending on what part of the country you live in, early September, mid-September. This is a great time to hunt a mature whitetail buck. Why is that? Well, bucks, bachelor groups of bucks, are in a summer feeding pattern. So when they lose their velvet, they're still kind of running together, and they're still in that late summer feeding pattern, which means they're very predictable as they go from food source to bedding, back from bedding to food source. There's a lot of predictability that we can take advantage of as hunters. There are some things you got to be careful about, though, as you start to hone in on a mature whitetail. But unfortunately, there are some states where this is not an option for you whitetail hunters. Maybe where your bow season comes in a little bit later, where the bucks are maybe already out of velvet, because there's a window, I believe, where these bucks, once bucks lose their velvet in September, late August, up through middle of September, wherever it is they live, the testosterone level in these bucks begins to increase just a little bit every single day, and it peaks out in what we know as the rut. The testosterone level grows. And as the testosterone level grows in these bucks every single day, they become less tolerable of one another. So you see the bachelor groups of bucks start to break up not long after they lose velvet. Well, some states, the archery season may not come in until October 1st, middle of October. For example, in the Southeast, the Alabama archery season for whitetails comes in sometime in October. So the hunters in Alabama and Mississippi, they don't have an opportunity to really take advantage of these bucks in this late summer feeding pattern, because when bow season comes in, these bucks their testosterone level has increased, the bachelor groups are broken up, they kind of are starting to go into that nocturnal stage. Because what happens is bucks are very visible during the summertime when they're in a bachelor group in velvet. And as they lose their velvet and the rut starts to become more on their mind, they kind of go into that season where they're a little bit nocturnal. And then pre-rut, which is another topic we'll discuss, but taking advantage of hunting a buck during early season is phenomenal. Here's the key, though. Very seldom can you hunt a buck during early season as they're still in that late summer feeding pattern, maybe in velvet, just coming out of velvet, in the mornings. Why is that? Because food is king. These bucks wake up in the morning, all they're interested in is being safe, bedding down, and eating. The rut is not a thing. It's not on their mind. They're on this pattern. Whether they're going to a soybean field or a cornfield or a kudzu patch or a clover food plot in the south or whatever it may be, they have a preferred food source. That's where they're going. It's very difficult to hunt these deer in the morning times, because that would require basically finding a pinch point or a funnel between the food source they would leave, probably right at daylight, as they make their way back to bedding, which can be very difficult. You certainly do not want to go and hunt in or around the bedding area that time of year, because once you blow a deer out of the bedding area, it's over. You're going to change their pattern completely. So really, this time of year, I've always found it to be more productive to concentrate on hunting these deer early season around the food source. But here's the key. We all get amped up about putting out trail cameras or spotting or sitting up there and glassing and seeing these deer, which is fine, but you cannot go into these areas in or around when the bucks are in there feeding or making their way there. Like if you put a trail camera out, let's say on a soybean field or a food plot or a kudzu field or a trail, don't go in there and check the card in prime deer moving hours. I would wait and check the card during the middle of the day, whether this is August or September. Go in there when the deer are not going to be around the food source and check the card. Don't go in during prime time. If you want to scout and you want to video, video is a big deal now. Everybody wants to go video, which I get it. That's in my heart too. You don't want to be too close to the food source to where you take the chance of the wind swirling and it catches your scent and then you blow them out. Well, a big mature buck, they may not play that game. They may change their patterns completely. So be very careful when you go in and around these food sources, and especially when you go in, you've identified a buck you want to try to take. You know the food source he loves, the preferred food source that he's really hitting. You want to hunt him over that food source. You have to make sure that if you're going to hunt him in the evenings, you've got the perfect wind. And let me say this while we're on that subject. Light and variable winds, not a good thing, because that means the wind's doing this, swirling. There's no defense on a swirling wind in late summer, early fall. You want to have a little bit of a breeze to carry, and the wind has to be perfect where you put your stand. Here's another thing people don't think about. They may go to a soybean field or a kudzu field or a food plot to hunt. Let's say they got a 5.5-year-old 10-point coming in there on like clockwork. They're going to go in there. The wind's perfect. They got their stand hung. They hung it in the middle of the day. They've been very cautious. They go in there. They hunt the stand for the first time. Everybody's fired up, excited. Let's say the buck comes in there with some other bucks, but the buck he's trying to shoot is not in range. Well, they're going to be out there feeding, and it's going to get dark. How do you get out of there? How do you get out of there without educating those deer, without bumping those deer? This is something you got to think about. You got to have a strategy. When we used to hunt the Milk River in Montana for years, we would all hunt on alfalfa fields. We'd be up there at dark. If we did not shoot an arrow, or obviously we had a plan. The rancher in his truck would drive in just after dark with the headlights on, would keep the truck running, don't cut the truck off, leave the lights on. We would climb down out of the tree, jump in the truck, and drive off. We did not spook deer nearly as bad doing that as trying to get down and walk out. So whether you're hunting these deer in Iowa or Georgia or Pennsylvania or New York or wherever it may be, you've got to have an exit strategy to get out of a situation. If you don't release an arrow, you don't shoot your deer, you got to have a way to get out of there without boogering deer. So early season is a great time to hunt big deer, but you got to be careful not to contaminate the area. So we've identified, in my opinion, the first great time to hunt a mature whitetail is early season, if where you hunt allows it. The second best time, another great time to hunt a mature whitetail, is pre-rut. I know a lot of you out there are going, oh, he's about to say rut. Well, no, pre-rut is an entirely different stage in my mind when it comes to hunting a big mature whitetail buck. Why is pre-rut different than rut? Well, here's the reason. As we mentioned a minute ago, the testosterone level of these bucks continues to rise, and it peaks out at the peak of the rut, which, let's just say, generally speaking, around the country is the latter half of November, second, third week of November. Obviously, South Texas is a little different, but we're just talking generally speaking. The pre-rut is when these bucks, their testosterone level has gotten to a point where they are amped up, they're ready to breed, they don't like each other, the bucks can't tolerate each other. This is when the bucks really set out and they start establishing their territory, protecting their territory, establishing dominance over their territory, their home range. This is done through scraping and rubs and, of course, fighting. This is where the rubber meets the road. This is where the bucks know that the does are just around the corner. They're going to start coming into heat. And these bucks are ready to breed. They have all this sexual frustration built up. They're fighting, they're scraping, they're rubbing. And it starts out, a lot of this buck sign is done at night. You may walk through the woods and see all these scrapes and rubs and you go, wow, this is incredible. Man, these bucks are really on their feet. Yeah, they are, but a lot of this is being done at night initially. But as the rut gets closer, this pre-rut period, this is a great time to hunt a whitetail buck. What is the pre-rut? Well, let me back up and say I asked Don Kiske, Whitetail Freaks. Great friend, big supporters. I mean, everybody knows who Don Kiske is. I consider Don Kiske to be one of the greatest whitetail hunters alive. I asked Don Kiske one day, I said, Don, what is your favorite day? If you had to pick one day to bow hunt a mature whitetail, what's your one day you could pick? And without hesitation, he said, October 28th. Just like that, October 28th. I was amazed at his conviction of how fast he came up with that answer. And I said, Don, why October 28th? He says, well, the bucks are so ready, and they know it's still a week or two before the first doe comes in the heat. They are so ready. Now they're starting to get on their feet a little bit during daylight. But what I like about October 28th is if you can ever get a weather system to move in and around that late October time frame to where temperatures are cooler than normal, he said, if you have a cold front come in the last week of October, you need to quit your job, leave your family, whatever it takes. You need to be sitting in a tree because those bucks are so ready. He said, but not only are the bucks ready to breed, the temperature has got them on their feet now, early morning, late evening, cruising, looking for that hot doe, or maybe they're just going out there to pick a fight, but they're on their feet early morning, late evening. He said, but here's the key. That time frame right there is the best time frame to call in a deer. They will respond to the rattling horns. They will respond to a grunt call like no other time of the year. Not to say that they won't come to the horns throughout November or come to a grunt call throughout November, if you're talking Midwest or eastern part of the U.S. He said, that's the time where deer will respond to the rattling horns and the grunt call. And while we're on that subject, I asked him, I said, okay, Don, how much will you rattle? He said, David, I will not rattle to a buck unless I can lay eyes on him first. If I'm sitting in my stand, let's say I'm in a pinch point or a field edge or a tree row, if I see my target buck, and he could be 300 yards away, 200 yards away, or whatever, if I lay eyes on him, then I'll pick up the horns and I'll hit them together. Why do I like to wait till I can see the deer? He said, because I want to be able to gauge his reaction. As opposed to blind rattling, you go in and you're just hitting the horns together, which we all have done and we all will continue to do, and it works sometimes. But for Don Kiske, he says, I would much rather wait till I see that buck, hit the horns together, and I can gauge his response and his reaction, his interest level based on that, and I can work him as I can watch him. If he shows no interest, I'm not going to just sit there and keep rattling. But if he starts coming and he hangs up, and I know I can tickle him together, he may come a little closer. He said also the grunt call, the same thing. He said, but that pre-rut is a great time to shoot a mature deer. Pre-rut, late October, early, maybe the first 3 or 4 days of November. He said that is a great time. So that's a second great time to hunt a mature whitetail. But I would be remiss if I didn't say real quick, so why is the rut not, if you may be saying, David, why is the rut not one of your favorite times to hunt a whitetail? Well, we're all going to hunt during the rut. That's just what we do. Obviously, there are a lot of giant deer taken in the U.S. during the rut, like when they're running a doe, chasing a doe, with a hot doe, for sure. I'm just talking about the best times. He said a lot of times, well, one of the most popular terms that have come up in the whitetail world the last 10 or 12 years is lockdown. This is a new phrase now that we all use, and it's real. Lockdown is real. What lockdown is when that mature buck that you're hunting, that first doe comes in the heat, guess what? He's going to take that doe that's coming in the heat. He knows she's coming in the heat. He's going to literally cut her out of the herd and take her somewhere till she comes in the heat. He breeds her. Then she leaves and he gets back into the search for another doe. That lockdown period is very difficult to hunt. Any veteran, successful whitetail hunter will tell you, if you roll into deer camp, wherever it may be, and the bucks are in lockdown, that can be a very tough week to 10 days, maybe sometimes 2-week period where no matter what you do, the bucks are with hot does. They're not going to come to the horns. They're not going to come to a grunt call. They've got their girlfriend right there. So that's a very tough time. So the rut, generally speaking, I'm just talking generally, the pre-rut I like better than the rut. Now, the other time that I think is a great time to hunt a mature whitetail, and this is not going to surprise you, but it's post-rut. It's late season. This can be an incredibly effective time to hunt a whitetail, but there's some challenges to this time of year. The challenges are you've got to have a combination of a couple of factors here. And when I'm planning whitetail hunts for Bill or Tyler or myself or whoever, and we're going to hunt late season, let's say we've got an Iowa muzzleloader tag second week of December, or maybe third week of December, January 1st. What you're really hoping for, and if you're hunting your home lease, wherever it may be, it can be North Carolina, it can be Alabama, it can be Montana. If you're hunting late season, well, some states, the whitetail season actually goes out in November. So this would eliminate those states from late season. But most seasons go through January 1st or January 15th. You really, really need cold weather, colder than normal temperatures. You also need food source. And believe it or not, it takes someone who is managing their property properly to have enough food source, whether it's standing beans or standing corn or an incredible alfalfa field or a food source that's holding these deer together. So let's say the mature bucks, they've rutted, they've done their breeding, they're tired, they're hungry. Once they get over that initial shock of breeding and running, all they want to do now is eat. But they're not going to get on their feet and eat during daylight unless it's cold and they have an incredibly attractive preferred food source. So over the years, when I've talked to a landowner and we've had an opportunity to go in and hunt late season, my first question is, what do you have for food source? Well, we had corn, we had standing corn, but we've combined that. We've combined our beans. The acorns are going to be gone. Well, if you don't have preferred food remaining on the property, you can have blizzard conditions, a foot of snow, sub-zero temperatures. The bucks are going to get up and feed, but it's not going to be on that piece of property. They're going to travel to where they can find a food source. So food source is king during late season. But if you are managing your property and you have a hunting club or you have your own property, if you leave enough food for a winter to hunt deer in late season and that they haven't destroyed it or eaten all of it before the middle of December, and you get cold temperatures, those two ingredients right there can be an unbelievable combination for a successful late season whitetail hunt. Here are a couple of things you have to be careful about hunting late season, as I have experienced it over the years. You've got to have an exit strategy. The deer are going to pile in there like I would not hunt mornings. We'd never hunt mornings late season because you're hunting a food source. You go in there in the mornings before daylight, you're going to blow deer out, you're going to educate them. It's going to change the dynamics of the hunt completely. You go in there maybe even at noon, because now it's getting dark at 5, 6 o'clock. You go in there at noon when the deer are drifted off and bedded, and you prepare to sit till dark. Well, the deer come in at dark in droves. If you've got a lot of food and it's really cold, how are you going to get out of there if you've not tagged your buck you're after? You got to have an exit strategy, whether it's somebody to come in and pick you up. So just be careful about that. Tree stand hunting, I have found out over the years with us, when I've got a cameraman with me, you can hide one person in a tree after all the leaves have fallen and there's no foliage up there. You can hide one person in a big gnarly tree. You start putting a second person in the tree with you in the form of a cameraman, well then you got an issue where one of the two of you are going to be silhouetted and you have no backdrop that time of year, so you have to be very careful. Here's a tip for you that I learned years ago, that in those circumstances where you're hanging a tree stand, now a lot of people hunt out of the enclosed blinds, the hard-sided blinds now, but I love still hunting out of a tree stand. If you're hunting in a tree stand late season, all the leaves are falling. What I learned years ago was I literally would wear snow Realtree camo. Because in the tree, if I had on my snow camo, I'm a lot less likely to be silhouetted having on snow camo. And it's crazy. It's amazing how that works. So what we've talked about today are 3 great times to hunt a mature whitetail. Extreme early season when they're coming out of late summer feeding pattern, the pre-rut before the does come into heat, and also extreme late season. But you got to have food and cold temperatures.